Mr. Speaker, the Blue Belt programme supports the protection and sustainable management of 4.3 million square kilometres of ocean around Britain's overseas territories.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Blue Belt programme, directly funded by the FCDO, is a fantastic way not only to help with climate change, but to improve our environment. But one of the biggest threats to oceans is plastics. So will the government consider strengthening the UN Global Plastics Treaty in upcoming negotiations when they take place?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. And it's interesting to note that 85% of plastic pollution in the Pacific and Indian Ocean comes from just 6 rivers. And therefore, an international treaty really matters. And the point that he makes is a very good one, and it is at the centre of the negotiations which our honourable friend for Taunton Deane, a minister at DEFRA, was talking about last week in Ottawa.
Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw the House attention to my entry in the Register of Members' Interests. The Deputy Foreign Secretary will be aware that over 90% of Britain's biodiversity is within the overseas territories themselves, and I was very privileged last summer to visit St Helena in the Atlantic Ocean, where I was absolutely amazed by both the natural biodiversity on the island but also around the island in the seas. What more help is the British government giving to the overseas territories governments to make sure that the biodiversity of the overseas territories can be enhanced and maintained?
Well, I'm very glad the honourable gentleman has had a chance to visit St Helena, as have I in the past, one of the most remarkable places on earth. I can tell him that on the issue of cleaning up the ocean and plastics, the UK is a founding member of the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic Pollution, which is a group of 60 countries, and their central aim is to stop plastic from flowing into the environment by 2040. These overseas territories are not suppliers of plastic, but they are receivers of a lot of it, and that is why it's so important.
Ray.
Mr. Speaker, the recent Environmental Audit Committee reports into both the Arctic and the current one into the Antarctic, both of which I chair, have called attention to the excellent Blue Belt programme and how very important it is both in the Arctic and in the Southern Ocean. One of our recommendations, however, was that that would only work properly if all of the different Arctic ministers and different departments were to get together on a reasonably regular basis to discuss it. Can the Deputy Foreign Secretary please advise whether that committee has yet met or what plans he has to call it?
No, he makes a very important point. I'm advised that the meeting is, I think, today, Mr. Speaker.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Many of my constituents in Edinburgh West have written to me concerned that the UK is delaying its ratification of the Global Ocean Treaty, which could limit human activity in what will be known as sanctuary areas to protect valuable marine life. So has the Minister made an assessment of how this could work with the Blue Belt programme to ensure our overseas territories have the highest possible protection for their water and their biodiversity?
Well, the Honourable Lady makes a very good point, and the Government is extremely well joined up on that, a point that I was making earlier about the DEFRA Minister working closely with the Foreign Office on these matters. So I think she can reassure her constituents that this matter is very much in hand.
Stephen Hammond.
Number 2, please, sir.
Mr. Speaker, the UK played a leading role in securing the passage of Security Council resolutions 2728 and 2720, which set out the urgent demand for expanded humanitarian access.
Can I thank my honourable friend for that answer? The way to a sustainable peace, as he says, is the humanitarian access. Could he please confirm what the UK government is doing? 2 things. One is to ensure the full funding of UNRWA again, and secondly, what it will do to stop the Hamas terrorist group affecting the supply of aid to Palestinian citizens.
Well, he is right about the importance of aid getting in. UNRWA is a critical organisation in achieving that. He will know that we have had a chance to look at the Kelowna report. I spoke about this matter with the UN Secretary-General yesterday when I was in New York. We are waiting for the OIOS report, which we expect to hear about soon, and then we will reach our conclusions on the best way of getting aid into Gaza. But he may rest assured that we are doing everything we can to ensure that aid gets in.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next Sunday will mark 100 days since the International Court of Justice warned of a genocide in Gaza. Yet the Israeli military continue to ignore the legally binding orders of the world's highest court, continue to indiscriminately bomb Gaza and continue to block vital humanitarian aid, all whilst the UK stands by and lets the right-wing Netanyahu cabinet blatantly undermine the court's legitimacy. Mr. Speaker, when international courts are blatantly disregarded and the UN ceasefire resolutions are openly violated, can the Minister explain to me just what this means for the rules-based order he claims to uphold? Because to me, my constituents, the Palestinians and countless persecuted groups across the world, frankly, these rules are now not worth the paper they're written on.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that what he says, the way he reflects on what the ICJ said, is not accurate. What the ICJ did was they called for hostage release, they called for more aid into Gaza, and for Israel not to commit acts which violate the rights of Palestinians, and the government agrees with those 3 points.
Sir Julian.
Will the Deputy Foreign Secretary take the message back to his boss that the insertion of British troops on the ground in Gaza will simply play into the hands of those who wish to further divert attention away from the existential conflict between Russia and Ukraine? And does he share my sadness that there isn't a single mention of Ukraine in any of the questions on the order paper today?
Well, my right honourable friend will know that the government is absolutely committed to doing everything it can to help Ukraine. He will have seen the announcement made by the Prime Minister last week about the increase in defence spending, and where that announcement was made, I very much hope that he will not draw any conclusions from the order paper today, but note specifically this government's driving ambition to ensure that Ukraine is successful in beating back the Russians.
Tommy Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The creation of a sustainable peace in the Middle East will require the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside the 1967 borders. He will know that Prime Minister Netanyahu is now implacably opposed to the creation of such a state. So can I ask, what will the UK do in order to oblige Israel to comply with the international peace process? And does he think a sustainable peace is possible as long as Mr. Netanyahu remains in power?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there are many voices that are heard within Israel, but he will recognise that the predominant view of the region, of the United Nations, of regional powers and the great powers, and the view of the British government is that what is required is a two-state solution with both Palestine and Israel living behind secure borders in peace and safety.
Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy.
Mr. Speaker, more than 30,000 Palestinians are dead. More than 100 Israeli hostages are still unaccounted for. And Gaza is facing famine. The war must end now with an immediate ceasefire. That needs both sides to agree. It was Hamas, not Israel, which rejected the last internationally brokered ceasefire deal. Now a new offer is on the table. Hamas have the power now to stop the fighting. Does the Minister agree with me that Hamas should accept this deal and avert a catastrophic continuation of this war?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, he makes a very good point, and although these negotiations are fluid at the moment, he is right to say that Hamas should accept the deal that has been put on the table.
SNP spokesperson Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister knows that securing a sustainable peace will require a massive aid and rebuilding programme, and that UNRWA will have and must have a crucial part to play in that. Indeed, he himself has previously acknowledged that UNRWA have a vital role to play in aid and services in Gaza. Why then, having assured this House that he would come to a decision on the future of UNRWA's funding when he received Catherine Colonna's interim report, Has he sat on that report for 10 days and said absolutely nothing about restoring funding, and seems now, Mr Speaker, to be setting us up for even further delay? It's simply not good enough, Minister. So will you tell us now, Minister, when will this government make a decision on UNRWA's funding?
Well, Mr Speaker, we've been very clear that we are waiting for not one but two reports. And as I say, I discussed this matter yesterday with the UN Secretary-General. We know very well, as he does, that the assets which UNRWA has in terms of logistics, vehicles, warehouses and so forth are essential for the supply of humanitarian relief within Gaza. We are considering the matter carefully. He will also know that Britain is not currently in deficit in terms of its funding. We are fully funded at this point for UNRWA. UNRWA has also received additional resources, including private resources, as well as new governments coming in to support them. But we will consider carefully both those two reports in full, and then we will make a decision, and I will come back to the House to inform the House when that decision is reached.